Welcome to Selling with Story webinar, guys. I'm so glad that all of you are here. I know we have a ton of people that signed up for this webinar, so I'm sure people will be kind of trickling in as we get started here, but I'd like to get started right at 12 o'clock Pacific time anyway, to make sure to use your time wisely. So welcome. My name is Jules Taggart, and I am the founder of AMP and Pivot, and one of the reasons that I decided to host today's webinar is because I work with women entrepreneurs, and this is a question that comes up all the time. I'm telling a lot of stories, but none of them are actually selling what I do or helping me make more money. And so I want to show you today a few ways to sell with story. So yeah, we'll learn how to tell better stories, but I'm going to show you how to sell with story too, so it doesn't feel icky and gross. So before we get started, I just wanted to do a quick sound check and make sure we're good to go. If you can hear me, would you mind just putting a little note in the chat and letting me know that we're good? That would be great. So if you are not already at ampandpivot.com/sellwithstorylive, that's where you want to be. That's where all the action's happening, including the chat. So if you're watching this on Google Plus or YouTube or anywhere else, head on over to ampandpivot.com/sellwithstorylive and then join the conversation there. And there's about a 30-second delay. I'm using Google Hangouts, which I think is such a cool tool that we have available to us as entrepreneurs. So I'm using Google Hangouts today for the webinar, so there's about a 30-second delay. So I'll wait for a couple of seconds just to make sure you guys can hear me. Once I hear that in the chat, we'll move forward. But in the meantime, speaking of the chat, be sure to introduce yourself to everyone else that's there. If you've got questions throughout the presentation, oh good, you guys can hear me, great. Thanks so much. If you've got questions throughout the presentation, pop them in the chat, and I'd love for you also to introduce yourself. One of the great things about webinars, I think, is to get to know other people who are interested in the same things that you're interested in, and today that happens to be Selling with Story. So be sure to connect with the people there and check out their websites, follow each other on Twitter or however you guys want to connect. I'd love to see that happening in the chat today. So this presentation is being recorded, and I'm going to send you an email in a few hours with links to the replay, and I also have a couple of extra goodies for you. So that email should pop in your inbox in a few hours, and it'll have, again, the link to the replay, and it'll also have an extra goodie or two for you. So keep an eye out for that. And if you're talking about this webinar anywhere online today, so if you're tweeting right now, or if you're using Google Plus or Facebook, wherever you're at, the hashtag for this event is SellWithStory. So please use that just so we can all connect in all of the other places on the internet and talk about this webinar a little bit later. And the more I learn about Google Plus, the more I love it. And I'm still pretty new to the platform, but absolutely loving it. So if you're on Google Plus and you want to personally connect with me, I would love to connect with you there. On the screen right now, you should see a link to my Google Plus profile. So it's google.com/+JulesTaggart, and I'd love to connect with you there. So circle me up. All right, so it sounds like you guys can hear me, so let's get started. So got to work the slides here, huh? Oh, the joys of running your own webinar. Someday I'll have an assistant, right? So, agenda. What's the big deal about storytelling anyway? We're going to talk about that first. And that's the reason why you guys are here. And so I think we need to kind of get that out of the way before we even move into how to do it. The second thing we're going to talk about is the #1 reason why most stories don't work. And once you figure out what this reason is, making the changes that you need to make are going to be so much easier. So that's the second thing we'll talk about. And then we'll talk about what makes a story memorable and what inspires action. You want your stories to inspire your customers to act now. Not 6 months from now, not 6 weeks from now, right now. So how do you create stories that make that happen? And then I also want to share with you 5 areas of your content where you can work more story in. So your bio, your blog posts, your about pages, interviews, and client proposals. And I'm going to spend a little extra time on about pages because I reached out to the first 100 people who signed up for today's webinar and personally emailed you guys. So if you got an email from me, you were one of the early ones to sign up. And I asked you what you wanted to hear about most. Of these 5 topics, about pages was the #1 response. So by and large, a lot of you guys kind of want to learn how to put more of your story into your about page. So we will definitely be talking about that and spending time with some examples there. And again, at the end, I'm going to touch on your questions. So I want to leave plenty of time to answer your questions. So be sure to pop them in the chat. I'm not going to watch the chat as we go through this just because it's a little bit distracting for me. So if you don't get your question answered during the presentation, just know that I'll be taking a look at all this at the end and answering as many as I can. So why do stories matter? Stories are not just something you do because you like to hear yourself talk or hear yourself write, if you want to say it that way. Stories matter because they differentiate you and they make you real to your customers. It's the only difference maybe between you and the 1,000 other people who are doing exactly what you do. And I know that that's true for me. I am not the only person out there who helps clients with marketing and copywriting. There are tons of other people out there that do what I do, but not just like I do it. Excuse me. And that's the same for you. There may be tons of people that are in your space, in your competitors, but they don't do it the way that you do it. And the only way for your customers to know how you do things is to show them through your stories. So this weekend I was driving around in my car, running some errands, and listening to NPR. And I know that we've got a lot of Americans on today's webinar. We've got a lot of people from all over the world. So if you're in the United States, you know that's National Public Radio. It's a public radio station. So for those of you that are outside the United States, that's what it is. And they were running an annual fundraiser. Actually, they may actually do a few of these a year, 2 or 3. But this is their spring fundraiser. So they're trying to raise funds to keep the radio station on the air and keep the programming quality up to date. And they had a researcher on, and the researcher was talking about why do some people listen to NPR all the time and then donate when it comes time for the fundraising campaign? And why do other people who listen to NPR and love it, why do they not donate? What's the difference? And what they found through research is that people who don't donate don't think that the radio hosts are talking to them when they're asking. They think they're talking to any listener anywhere. So if the radio host, what they found is if the radio host can find a way for the listener to feel like they are specifically talking to them, they're going to get so much better, the better results. So one of the ways they do this is to work in stories. And it was funny because I'm having my first baby in July, and so I'm listening to this thing in my car, and the story that comes on directly after this was about NPR and the programming that they have for new moms. And 6 months ago, this would not have mattered to me at all. I didn't have mom stuff on the brain, but now that I do, it does matter to me. So I'm listening and I'm like, oh, you know what? They're talking to me. When they're asking for a donation, they're asking me. And so if there's a way for you to connect with your customer and make them know that you are literally talking to them, they are willing to buy. But I think there's so much content out there that we often just get wrapped up in. We get wrapped up in it. We don't think that the person that's selling something is selling something directly to us. So I like to call this the heartbeat effect. And the purpose of your storytelling obviously depends on the situation. But as business owners, we are telling stories about brands. We're either telling stories about our own brand, maybe our personal brand, or the brand of a client of ours. And so your job when someone lands on your website or maybe meets you in person is to motivate them to buy. Now, you don't have to hit them over the head with it, and it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be a salesy jerk, but you have to subtly move people down the process of paying for your services or your products, whatever that is. And I think the hardest part about this is, how do we do that? I mean, we all know we're supposed to do that, right? But how? I think it's by giving your brand a heartbeat, by giving people something to love, other than just your product or service. There are, like we said earlier, thousands of people who may do what you do, maybe hundreds of thousands. I mean, I'm in marketing, so there's probably hundreds of thousands of people that do what I do. So telling great stories through your content is one way to differentiate yourself. The stories that you tell are a way for your best customers not only to find you, but to connect with you, trust you enough to buy from you. So they have to find you, connect with you, trust you, and buy from you. 4 steps, that's a lot of steps. The thing about storytelling is it can speed all of that up. Instead of that taking months or maybe 50 visits to your website, it can take a much shorter amount of time through storytelling. So what's the #1 reason why stories don't work? Most stories don't work because they're not relatable. Again, like the NPR story I was telling you earlier, people don't think you're talking to them. They don't think that they can see themselves in your story. People really buy with their hearts, not with their heads. So if you're unable to move someone emotionally, you will never motivate them to buy, even if your idea or product is way better than all of your competitors. They want to see themselves in your story. And if you can make them the hero, oh my gosh, you are totally set. So any story your customer cannot fit themselves into easily will be seen as the me show, which is all about you, that sleazy sort of storytelling that just feels icky. It'll feel like that. And it honestly has the opposite effect of what you want. That kind of storytelling persuades people to go somewhere else and find somebody else's solution because they can't identify with it. But if they can see themselves in your story, they are way more likely to buy from you. So that's one of the things that I talk with clients about all the time. People want to work more storytelling into their content, but they feel like it's too much about them. So how do you get around that? And it's a valid concern. Marketing is about being relentlessly helpful, but you can't be relentlessly helpful if it's all about you. But working storytelling into your content without it being about you is actually really easy. In fact, the best stories might technically be about you, but they're really about your client. How does that work? People want a story that they can relate to their own lives and their own personal experiences. So if you're telling great stories, again, they're relatable. Even if it's about you, it's going to be something that your customers can understand and maybe see themselves doing too, or see themselves reacting the same way. And because you get this, it makes your customer feel like you really get them too. And you're instantly more real. You're no longer just someone who's trying to sell them some abstract solution. You've got a heartbeat. And because of your story, you're now more approachable, trustworthy, and likable. And you are infinitely more likely to get hired. So what are the 5 areas of content that you can infuse with your story? Like I said earlier, your bio, blog posts, your about page, interviews, and client proposals are all areas where you can infuse mini stories that help your client realize that you're the best choice for them. It helps them find you, connect with you, trust you, and buy from you. Those 4 things. So let's start with your bio. I like to think of your bio as a gate. It leads to the rest of your content. But ain't nobody got time to listen to your entire bio. If yours is anything like mine, it's maybe 3 or 4 paragraphs long. There's never going to be a time where someone wants to listen to the whole thing. They may want to read it on your website after they've already learned about you, but then it's too late. Your bio really needs to feel like a soundbite. And it's your first opportunity to connect with someone, not your last. So all your soundbite has to do is capture attention and make your customers want to learn more. So one of the questions I get all the time is, are soundbites really a story? Because they're so short. I like to keep my soundbites under like a couple sentences, or even like the length of a tweet, like 140 characters. And is that really a story? Does that even make sense? And I would say yes. I think they tell a little bit more about you and offer your customers a way to relate to you, and that makes them a story. So one of the myths about storytelling in general is that it has to take more time, that it makes your content longer and more complex. And I don't think it has to. I think sometimes stories sum up your point without you having to go into a ton of detail, because people can relate to it and know exactly how you feel or how it feels to be in that moment. So sound bites work because they're short and they're easy to remember. And like I said earlier, that's pretty much all people have time for right now. When you first introduce yourself to someone at a networking event, or you first even introduce yourself in the chat here, you have a couple sentences to capture people's attention, or that's it. Or they're not going to head over to your website, or they're not going to be listening to the rest of what you have to say. So really short attention spans. So you see sound bites often used in bios or introductions, like you're doing in the chat right now, introducing yourselves. Or like obviously a Twitter bio is very short. They're also great for a quick intro. So if you're meeting somebody new and they say, hey, what do? You want to have a sound bite for that. It's snackable content. So how do you create a great sound bite? Well, In the words of Neil deGrasse Tyson, and I really hope I'm saying that right, he's an astrophysicist, and he's got some really interesting videos on YouTube, so if you ever have 10 free minutes, just check him out. He's very interesting. But he says a soundbite is a few words that are informative, make you smile, and are so tasty that you might want to tell somebody else. He talks about a soundbite being useful because it triggers interest in someone, preferably you, right? And then people go and put more effort into learning more. But they're never going to take that next step to learn more if they're not interested from the get. People, like I said, have such short attention spans, you have to get them quickly. So when you take that first introduction to somebody as an opportunity to just garner a little bit of interest with a tasty soundbite instead of selling, people become self-driven to learn more about you. You can't stop them if you tried. But when people try to sell in that first soundbite, it often turns us off. So if you can work on getting a second date, I guess that's what I usually like to call it. So you're not trying to go home with someone on the first date of introducing yourself. You're trying to get a second date. So if, like for instance, someone is not going to find you on Twitter and think, you know what, I've read this stellar bio, I'm ready to invest with this person and spend, $10,000 on whatever their program is. It does not work that way. Soundbites are an introduction to you and why someone should care. So it's the next step. So tell them what you do and tell them a little bit about who you are and why they should care. So here are a few things you can do when you're writing a soundbite. Instead of selling, work on getting a second date. So be interesting. You don't have to be closing a deal in your soundbite. In fact, you shouldn't be closing a deal. Keep it short. I like to keep mine under the length of a tweet, so 140 characters. And I think that's about the amount of attention people have and are willing to listen to you talk about yourself when they don't know if you're worthwhile listening to yet. The other thing I would do is practice saying it out loud. This is really key because sometimes you write something and it feels really good, and then you go to introduce yourself to somebody and you say your little soundbite and it just feels wordy or maybe too formal or maybe even too casual. Practice saying it out loud. If you're going to use a soundbite, you want to know how it feels rolling off your tongue. Keep it something, it's nice to be short because it can be something that's memorable. You want to memorize it because people are lazy. If you use the same words over and over and over again to describe yourself, other people are going to use your words. It is that simple. If you use different words to describe yourself every single time, people have no idea what to do. Make it easy for them to memorize it, which means you have to memorize it. So say it the same way every single time. So one person that I think does this particularly well is Natalie Sisson. I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with her. She's a suitcase entrepreneur, but she always talks about herself in terms of providing freedom in business and adventure in life. So here in her Twitter bio, she's got it as a question. Do you want to create freedom in business and adventure in life? On her website, I think it's her tagline. In her emails, it's at the bottom of her email. Everywhere she goes, you hear this phrase, which makes it really easy to repeat, and it makes it really easy to tell to other people. So she's a great example of somebody who's got her soundbite down. She knows exactly what she does. And it's not salesy. It begs the question, well, how do you do that? Anytime your soundbite can beg that question, you're working in the right direction. So blog posts. Oh, you know what? I'm going to really quickly check and make sure that you guys are good in the chat before we roll into blog posts. Sounds like there's a little bit of YouTube trouble, but hopefully we're doing okay. So blog posts. Hopefully you guys are ready to get nerdy because this is the nerdy part of today's webinar. This is a trick that will make you geek out over storytelling, or at least I hope it does. It's called combined relevance. But I think it's easier to kind of relate to if you call it story blogging. So story blogging is where what you teach meets what you experience. So this method is effective because the story helps to hook the reader right away, and when they're on your blog, you have just a couple seconds to grab them, right? But then you can get into the point of your story pretty quickly. And it all comes down to verbs. So whatever your topic is for your next blog post, maybe you're blogging later this week and you've got a topic in mind. Think about that topic and pull the verb out of it. So for example, if I was writing a blog post about how to choose the best running shoe for fall or spring or whatever season, the verb in that section is choose. So That's the word that I would be focusing on and trying to find a story that relates to that verb. So then think about your own experiences that have had to do with that particular verb. When was the last time you had to make a choice from a bunch of different options? And when you're thinking about this choice, it does not have to do with running. It does not have to do with shoes. It really doesn't have to be about your teachable topic. In fact, it's probably better if it's unrelated. So, for instance, maybe your most recent choice was whether to go on a beach vacation with your family or to go skiing with your friends. These are obviously totally unrelated to how to choose the best running shoe, and that's okay. So write a short paragraph on making the choice between the two vacation options. What are all of the smaller decisions that go into that bigger choice? You've got to pick a budget, you've got to decide on a location, you want to figure out if you're going to drive or if you're going to fly, or whether you're taking your kids or you're going to leave them at home. All of these choices are relatable to your teachable topic, which is how to pick the best running shoe for fall. People need to look at their budget, they need to figure out what terrain they're going to run on. There are tons of mini choices that go into the bigger decision. So now you have a story from your personal experience that ties directly into the teachable topic that you want to talk about in your blog post. When you use a verb to tie them together, readers stay interested longer. So that is my trick for working stories into your blog post. Whoa. Well, I'm obviously Prezi challenged. Thanks for sticking with me, guys. All right, so about pages. This is the part earlier I mentioned. I emailed the first 100 people who signed up for this webinar and asked what they wanted to hear about, and this is what I heard from you guys. You want to hear about pages and how to work story into them. So this is a big topic for many of you. And the biggest misconception I would say about adding stories to your about page is that it has to be all about you. That is where 99.9% of people go wrong with telling a story on their about page. Obviously, it's your about page, and people click on it with the intent to get to know you better, and that's what they think they're there for. But that's not what they're really there for. They want to know you better only so that they can decide whether or not you are the right choice for them. They want to know if you can fix their problem. And they want to know that you can do all of that and be kind of fun to work with too. So that's what your story has to tell them. It has to be more about them than it is about you. You want the person to walk away from reading your about page saying, yep, that's the person I want to work with. She is definitely the one for me. So when you're coming up with a story to share in your about page, you have to be super picky about who you're writing for, because the story has to be relatable to them. And if it's too broad, if your audience is too broad, it makes it really hard to write one story that relates to a bunch of different audiences. So the way that I like to work story into my about page is by dropping personality bombs, choosing little snippets of info that give people a closer look at who you are, and more importantly, why they should actually care. And this isn't a full story, it's just a little glimpse into who you are. So let me show you a couple examples here. So this is at the bottom of my about page on my website. I have these little circles, and when you hover over them, text pops up. So the bottom left is an example of hovering over one where text pops up. And it's not a full story. It's just a little glimpse into who I am, and more importantly, whether I would be the right choice for you or not, or for the visitor who's on my website or not. Each personality bomb is really about the person reading my site, not about me. So this bottom one, the one on the bottom left, is talking, all of these kind of talk about my thoughts on business and life, I guess. And so this one is about organization, and I basically say Moleskine notebooks, Post-it notes, and highlighters they can fix like any problem, and I honestly believe that they can, except for burnout. That requires vodka. So this, while it is about me, it's really about the person who's looking at my site and deciding if I'm the best choice for them. If this is somebody who doesn't like organization, or they feel like that's just not something that is interesting to them, they're not going to like working with me, because I am type A and that's just how I roll. If it's somebody who doesn't want to have fun and relax and not work 24/7, then they're also probably not going to like working with me. So it's a way for them to self-select. And for you guys, the reader, to learn a little bit more about who I am and my personality. So here's another example. And this trick, this personality bombs trick, I actually learned from Mike Michalowicz. I don't know if I named it that, but he came up with the idea. He's the author of The Pumpkin Plan. If you've never read that book, it is awesome. So check that out. But Mike's ideal customers are entrepreneurs who want to scale. They have done the small business thing for a while, and they're ready to hire more people and grow. But they don't want their company to turn into some boring corporate monstrosity. They still want to feel entrepreneurial, but they want to grow. So that's Mike's audience. So on his About page, he drops personality bombs left and right. And here's a little example of what he's got: a picture of him looking normal in a sweater or something. But then when you scroll over it, it shows this random picture of the chest hair and the flower. And on his About page, he talks about he drops these little personality bombs. So he says that he'd rather get a beer than take a final exam, and then he lists all these accolades that he has. So yeah, he's had all these accolades, he's spoken at all these really cool places, but what he's telling you is that he is not organized, but he's experienced and knowledgeable and sought after in his field, but he's also a guy that would rather drink a beer than take a final exam, right? So what does that tell his customers, these people who want to grow their company, but they want to do it in a way that's not corporate-y and boring? It's telling them he's going to get the job done, but you're also going to have a lot of fun doing it with him. So this isn't really about beer or accolades or final exams. It's about showing his customer who he is and giving them the chance to decide if he's the right choice. So your personality bombs on your website are going to do the same thing. And when you're writing them, I would suggest starting with emotion. So how do you want someone to feel about you after they read your About page? Depending on your business, this could be a jillion emotions. I would try to stick with one. So do you want people to think that you're fun, that you're serious, that you're experienced, that you question authority, maybe you're great with kids, or you don't take no for an answer? Whatever you want people to feel about you when they walk away from reading your About page, keep that in mind first. The things people see in you and in your stories are really a reflection of what they see in themselves. So make sure that the stories that you're telling are things that is exactly how you want your customer to feel. So once you figure out what this feeling is, what this emotion is, talk about a story from your real life that elicits this emotion. So no fake stories on your About page. I mean, there are a lot of, in blog posts you can come up with a story and say, kind of phrase it and tell people that it was something that you just imagined or whatever, but not on your About page. Your About page has to be real stories. It has to be about you. So here's an example. Let's say you lead, I don't know, online seminars or workshops for first-time parents, and you want these parents to visit your About page and feel relieved. That's the emotion you want them to feel. Relieved that you're experienced and you come highly recommended by other parents, not just any parents, but parents that they can identify with. And relieved that they have finally found someone to teach them how to care for their baby once it arrives. So that's how you want people to walk away from your About page. This emotion is going to sell. Not only have you identified what the emotion is that you want people to feel when they walk away, but think about a story where you've helped someone feel that relief. Or think about somebody who's told you, I feel so relieved to work with you. What happened? What did you do for that person? Tell that story on your About page. So what emotion do you want people to feel when they land on your About page? That's how you start writing a personality bomb. And use those personality bombs to pepper your About page. So interviews. This is a really cool trick that I've been using for about 6 months now, and it has seriously revolutionized my interview process. I used to really stress about interviews because I wasn't sure, you don't want to say the same things that everybody else are saying, but you don't really know how to do that, right? Because you don't know the questions in advance. So I don't know about most of you guys, but most of the interviews that I do are either podcasts or web TV shows, or sometimes I'll do like a Q&A blog post as a guest post for somebody else's blog. So I see a lot of the same people being interviewed all over the place. All the experts are being interviewed on all of each other's podcasts and whatever. And while I find this super annoying, I also think it's interesting that they tell the same stories every single time. And you don't have to do that. I think there's a better way to do that. The biggest mistake people make when they're being interviewed is to think that they're there to teach. And I think that's what a lot of these experts think. They're there to, share their great knowledge. They're really there to entertain, and they're there to teach you more about themselves. So how do you prepare to tell stories in an interview when you have no idea what question you're going to be asked? I like using first, best, worst, and last stories. So when you're being interviewed, you at least know the main topic. You at least know you're going to be interviewed about your world famous recipe for ice cream sandwiches, just for example. So here's how to prep for that interview, thinking about your first, best, worst, and last stories. Think about the first time you ever made ice cream sandwiches. Yeah, you're a world famous ice cream sandwich maker now, but think about the very first one you made. How did it go? What happened? What about the very best ice cream sandwich you've ever tasted it? Who made it? Where did you get it? And what made it so special? Or maybe the worst experience you've ever had with eating ice cream sandwiches. What made it so awful? And then the final thing is the last or most recent experience you've had. Again, with ice cream sandwiches in this case. What was different about this experience than all the rest? So this seems really simple, but if you know the topic of your interview, you have at least 4 stories that you can draw from. So let's use a different example just to kind of show you how this works with another example. So let's say you are a graphic designer, and part of what you do is work one-on-one with clients who need graphic design, but you also, on the side, you teach DIY graphic design to customers who can't necessarily afford to hire you for your one-on-one services, but it's products and courses that you sell where they can kind of teach themselves. So when you're being interviewed about DIY graphic design, think about the first time you ever made your own graphics. You're a graphic designer, obviously you had to start somewhere. So what was the first time like? What happened? What was the best piece of DIY graphic design you've ever created? Where did you come up with the idea? How did you carry it out? What were the results? What was the worst experience you've ever had with DIY design? Have you had an epic fail with DIY graphic design? If so, share that story. People love failure stories as long as you can overcome it. You can show how you've overcome it. So don't be afraid to talk about your biggest fail. And then what about your last or most recent experience with DIY graphic design? Have you decided to totally scrap it? Are you realizing that more and more people are needing this, so you're ramping up your services? What's that story, the most recent story? So you really only need one of these. If you're prepping for an interview, don't think you need to answer first, best, worst, and last. You want to have them ready because you never know what kind of questions are going to lead you into this story to be able to tell this story, but you don't want to necessarily use all of them because it's too much. One good story will make an interview. So just have these in your back pocket before the interview begins and you'll be ready to roll. All right, so client proposals, this is the last section. Writing stories into your client proposals is all about defining what's at stake for them. So when someone hires you or doesn't hire you, it's about defining what's at stake and reminding your client of these stakes all throughout the proposal. So I usually try to work storytelling into 3 places: the subject line, the intro, and the conclusion. So the thing about client proposals is it really isn't your story you're telling. You're telling your client's story, but like the shiny, sparkly version where everything in the world is right. So you're telling what their life would be like if they hired you. And don't make them imagine this on their own. A lot of times clients aren't, they're busy, right? And they're also not necessarily able to see what all the possibilities look like because they've never been presented with it before. So if you are presenting them with how life is going to be better, get detailed. Tell them all about the things that are going to be better about their life or their business or their bank account or whatever after working with you. So the first part is subject lines. Think about for a moment that you are your very best prospective client. Put yourself in their shoes and picture yourself sitting in their office. You're in front of your computer and all of a sudden a new email pops into your inbox. And the subject line just reads, proposal. That's it. You're going to do one of 3 things with this email. You are either going to ignore it, you are going to delete it, or you're going to open it, lean into your computer, and know that you are about to be blown away. Which of these 3 things do you want your clients to do with your proposals? I don't know about you guys, but I would like the third option. I want people to know that I'm going to give them something that's going to blow them away, and I think you guys probably do too. So I've got a little secret for you about proposals. Anytime you've sent off a proposal, 90% of your work is already done. They want to say yes. You just need to give them a reason to choose you. So my favorite example of this is several months ago I was hiring a social media strategist to do some work for my company, and I put out bids for proposals, and I got over 40 proposals for one job, which was crazy. So I had a lot to sort through, and I didn't really have a lot of time. I kind of needed this to happen quickly. So one of the proposals was from a woman named Erica Jordan, and her proposal, instead of saying social media proposal in the subject line was, hire Erica Jordan, you won't forget it. And of course I opened that email. I'm like, well, who's this ballsy girl that's just like, I am the best choice for you. I needed to know more about this woman. So I opened this email pretty immediately, and the first line of her email was, hey, check out this picture attached to this email where this is my reaction when I heard you were hiring. And this is the picture you're seeing on the screen right now, where she's like, hey, look how excited I am that you're hiring. So now she's got my attention, right? Within, the first 10 seconds, she made me open the email, and she's got my attention. And she's telling my story. She's telling why she's excited about working with me. So these simple little non-robot moves had me 90% hooked on her work before I had even read her proposal. And I think yours can do the same thing. So you're telling your client's story in the intro. And the subject line, not the intro, excuse me, the subject line. And the subject line is all about capturing their attention. And if that's true, then the intro and conclusion are all about showing them all the possibilities. So helping them imagine how life would be better if they hired you. And focus on their pain. I know that sounds harsh, but think about the reasons that they reached out to get proposals in the first place. What is that person struggling with? What do they want to overcome? That's where you need to show them all the potential and all the possibilities, and use a story to do it. So show them how you can fix their problem and give them a glimpse of what future looks like when you are working side by side with them. And remember, you're telling their story, what their story looks like in the future with you by their side. So it's not necessarily about you, it's about them. So again, the number one reason why most stories fail to convert visitors into buyers is because the reader can't relate. They can't see themselves in the story. People buy with their hearts. So if you infuse your content with stories, you're giving your brand a heartbeat. And brands with a heartbeat matter more to consumers. They just do. So to recap what we talked about today, we went through 5 areas of your content where you can infuse more story. We talked about your bio and using sound bites to get past that gatekeeper and get a second date. We talked about blog posts and story blogging using verbs in your topic idea. We also talked about personality bombs on your about page and how you can write something short and simple that's about you that shows your customer who you really are. And then interviews, that first, best, worst, last trick. So you've got 4 stories in your back pocket before you even start an interview. And finally, client proposals. So how to tell your customer's story, but a better version of it where they can see all the possibilities and get really excited about working with you. So infusing story into your content is obviously just the beginning. Every page of your website should be an invitation for people to spend money with you. And that doesn't mean it has to slap them in the face. It can be subtle, depending on what page of your website we're talking about, but people should know exactly what you offer and be able to clearly and distinctly buy from you on every page of your site. And if that's not happening right now, story can help you get there. If you have found today's webinar helpful, I'd love to invite you to check out Copy Ninja. It's a new copywriting course I'm launching on Wednesday. Very excited about it. And regularly the price is $259, but between now and the official launch on Wednesday, you can grab it for just $199. And it is for smart women entrepreneurs who know the value of their time and are sick of wasting their time on trial and error with copy that's just not converting. So here's a quick look at what it's all about. In Module 1, I'm going to show you how to do recon on the copy that's already on your site to figure out what's working and what's not. And I'm not going to do this. I'm going to show you the exact specific things you need to look at. So there's this cool heat mapping tool that you can use to get definitive answers on this. No more guesswork. You're not going to have to guess what's working and what's not. I'll show you exactly where people are scrolling, what they're clicking on, what they're hovering on, what words they're paying attention to. This tool is really, really cool. Then in Module 2, you're going to learn some really cool tricks, copy editing tricks that will transform your current copy. And this is perfect for anyone who doesn't want to rewrite content for their entire website. So if you've got a website already up and running and it feels pretty good, but you just kind of want to tweak it a little bit, this module is going to show you how to edit the content you've already written and make it more appealing to your customers. And if you've taken my blog revival challenge, you've seen a couple of these copy editing tricks in action already, but there are a bunch more in Module 2 of the Copy Ninja course. Then in Mod 3, I'm going to show you how to write an about page that sells you to your best customers, makes them excited about hiring you. And of course, there will be personality bombs in there. You'll learn a little bit more in-depth, step-by-step of how to write a personality bomb, but we're also going to talk about the entire about page, how to talk about your background and your experience in a way that motivates your customer to buy. Then Mod 4 is all about your Work With Me page. So this is your services page. Some people call it a products or services page. And I'm going to show you how to write descriptions of your products and services that motivate people to click on that Buy Now button now. Not next time they come to your website or 6 months from now, but right now. And then the last two modules are more in-depth about blogging. So your blog is obviously one way that you get people back to your site over and over again over time. So when you're ready to sell something, this is the audience that usually buys from you, your blog audience. So how do you nurture these readers and get them talking to you long before you're asking them to buy from you? That's what the last two modules are about. So in Mod 5, I'm going to show you how to create your next 6 months worth of blog topics. So if you've ever struggled to come up with relevant and interesting blog topics, I will show you exactly how to do it and come up with 6 months worth of content. So it's about 40 posts that you'll come up with, post ideas. And so if you don't blog once a week, maybe you blog every other week, this could actually probably last you a year. So there's tons of content that happens in Mod 5. And then in Mod 6, once you have all these ideas, how do you get it all done without spending your entire day doing it? I'm going to show you how to write an epic blog post in 45 minutes or less. So once you have this huge list of ideas and you've got lots of writing to do, you can figure out how to write not just a regular old blog post, but something that's shareable and clickable and commentable, where people want to interact with it. That is the kind of blog post I'll show you how to write in 45 minutes or less. It can be done, I promise you. So if this sounds like something that's a good fit for you, I'd love to, again, invite you to check out Copy Ninja. Between now and Tuesday night, which tomorrow night, it's $199, and then the price goes back up to regular price. So I would love to see you inside the course. And now I want to take a few minutes for Q&A. So I'm going to quickly run through the chat here, and you guys have been chatting away, so it might take me just a couple minutes to get to your questions. So give me a moment. If you had a question, if you don't mind popping it back into the chat, just so it's at the bottom so I can see it more easily, that might actually speed things up a little bit. So but I'm looking through your stuff right now. I love that people are putting their sound bites in the chat. This is great, guys. Okay. I'm going to give it a couple more seconds just because there is a 30-second delay here, just to make sure you guys don't have any more questions. But I would love to, if you do have questions, I'd love to answer questions about any of the topics. So your bio, your blog post, about page, interview, or client proposals, any of those areas where you'd like a little bit more information. And you're also welcome to email me after this event. So my email address is jules@ampandpivot.com. So if I don't get your question, because it looks like we don't have any in the chat, then you're welcome to email me afterwards. I'd love to stay in touch and answer your question. So again, Copy Ninja is $199 between now and tomorrow night, and you can grab it over at ampandpivot.com/copyninja, or there's a red bar on the webinar page today where you can just click right there and get all the details learn a little bit more about the program and the type of women that are taking this program and see if it's a good fit for you. So thank you so much, you guys. I am so grateful to have you spend time with me today. I know your time is valuable, so I want to let you go. But have a great week, and again, this replay will be popping into your inbox with a couple goodies from me later this afternoon. So have a good one.